Hello, and welcome to the Wired for Connection podcast.
This is a collaborative space where mother and son duo Donna Blethen and Elden Vala, that's me, along with our guests, focus on developing relational skills to allow for the fullness of our humanity to be present within our relationships. Our focus is first developing a healthy, whole, and loving relationship with ourselves. From there, we circle into the wider focus of creating healthy, whole, and loving relationships with those we care about. You can learn more about us and what we are up to by visiting www.wiredforconnection.life.
This podcast is coming to you from the ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone people, a land that is most commonly referred to these days as the San Francisco Peninsula in California. Welcome.
Connection informs our every thought, feeling, and action, whether we are conscious of it or not. Connection is the base of belonging. Belonging is survival. Welcome.
So, good morning. Good morning to everybody who's coming in to listen.
Or afternoon or evening or
or
wherever you are.
Or middle of the night, wherever you are. We hope you're listening. We love you listening. We're sending out wonderful vibes of love and connection. And glad you can join us. And I am glad that I can be with my son Eldon on this Friday morning that's sunny and beautiful at the coast. And hi.
Hi. Yeah, I think it's gonna be another hot day over here. We had Wednesday. So Bridge referenced California like engineering rain, which
Right.
is something that like I've been familiar with for a while. And like if you pay attention to the weather that comes along after you see lots of like what some people call chemtrails and some people call contrails up in the air, it's just an interesting thing just to pay attention. But on Wednesday, we'd had Tuesday, super hot day. Wednesday starts off hot day. And then like this kind of like interesting cloud cover blew in like around where we live. I think it was still sunny at your place.
No, Wednesday is when the fog came in. It was in the harbor and then it came over us and we got warm and got out.
Got it. Anyway, the clouds came in over here too, and then like it got super weird. Like it felt like there was gonna be like a tornado. Like there was like all these like gusty winds, and it was like super weird. And then it all just went away, and it was like super hot again. And I was just like, wow, like that felt weird. That felt like if it felt engineered to me. So anyway, that's just me getting present. That's been up for me. Wondering about what's happening with our environment, media environment.
That's so interesting because here's what happened to me that day. I woke up, it was sunny, it was beautiful. I wanted to take the girls to the beach. We were on our way to the beach and the wind had shifted from coming out of the northwest to coming out of the south. And I'm like, uh-oh, that means fog because I could see the fog bank out there. So we got a good couple hours in the sunshine before the fog started to come in, and then, wrapped the girls up, got them their clothes on and left. And I was thinking gratitude because it was the beginning. It's because of our system here where the heat from inland draws the fog in. So I always have to feel like I have to surrender to, okay, come cool us off. I volunteer to be the first layer of cooling for the inlands, but I have the winds as part of what Chief Arvel was saying that part of the weather changes are going to be winds and these erratic, unusual weather patterns. So when I feel currently that's where I go to is him. And I was going to look up seeding rain clouds because I've been feeling all proud of myself that I've been calling in the rain. Like I pray for rain. Like I want to have monthly rain in California to prevent the forest fires and to prevent the fires that are devastating. And I didn't add into the intention, but not seeded by the government.
We just had a fire out here on Tuesday, actually.
Yeah. Old Hills.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was electrical wiring, old electrical wiring. Like it's where it happened is like very close to a big like transformer station,
wow.
which I'm guessing is PG&E, but I don't know. So don't quote me on that.
Well, I have a wonderful, and I'm happy for anybody who wants to reach out to me for it. There's a dowser named Joey Korn who sent me to share a electromagnetic field clearing for any electronic thing you have in your house. So I do it with the transformers around here. When I'm hiking and I see one, and it's basically getting anything electrical to match the human bed pattern, the human chakra pattern, the human divine blueprint, to best support and heal our bodies mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And love to share that. Maybe I could share that in the notes so that people can use that on their electronics and electrical trends.
If you send me the link, I'll put it in there. And I just want to like just noticing that we both just outed ourselves for our kind of like out there like ideologies and beliefs and tools that we're using.
Yes, everyone, I am very out there if you haven't gathered that so far.
Which is fun. And I want to just like, so you said something about forest fires, and I've been thinking about forest fires a lot. I'm looking out, and I may even have mentioned this on the podcast, but it's like I drive a road when I drop Violet off at school, my daughter, that parallels the coastal mountain range that kind of separates where I live on the bay side of the peninsula from where her mom and you live on the ocean side of the peninsula. And there's a lot of redwood trees up there, and those redwood trees are looking mighty red, as opposed to when they're well hydrated, like, and there's a lot of water, very green. And one of the things that I'm being reminded of is that part of the life cycle of a lot of the trees is a fire cycle, that it's always been a natural cycle, and that the trees in many cases actually need fire in order to be able to continue to propagate and to like spread their seed and then like inseminate the earth, if you will. And that's always been part of it. And so it's like, I wonder if the issue is actually that we're not giving space to fires as much as we need to. And I wonder if part of the issue is that like in the way that the system that we live in has taken the land, if we've actually just set ourselves up for being out of balance with the natural cycle of fire.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
because
like,
we moved into the forests.
Right, so it's like if I'm thinking about the forests, and I have so much compassion like for anybody that lives in a forest. Like I would love to live in a forest. And I'm also like cognizant at this stage in my life, I'm like, oh, maybe a permanent dwelling in the middle of a forest that requires fire as part of its life cycle is not actually that permanent. And maybe like if I'm thinking about it in that way, it's like not such a good idea to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, very similar to like, I remember like I grew up at the ocean, not in the forest, right? And so like I can remember like when Laura and I were looking for a house, that we were looking like to purchase a home, like part of my thing was like, it can't be too close to the water,
Mm-hmm.
because I know that the water is going to rise.
Mm-hmm.
And if I want to have like equity in land, which I have like very different feelings about now than I did then, like I have to, like, I want to make sure that I'm doing this in a way that's going to have like some type of longevity. And like 50 years from now, the sea levels could have risen however many feet they could rise. And hey, guess what? Like those beachfront properties, like, I mean, in my lifetime, I've seen beachfront properties fall into the ocean, right? In the town that we grew up in.
Right.
So it just brings up, like, you know, Bridge had talked about integrity, and we were just talking about integrity, and like integrity is like, it's such a foundational like signature to look at, if you will, like energetic signature. It's like what does it really mean? And there's so much nuance to that. And like for me, like as someone who like is a settler on colonial territory, like part of coming into integrity is like actually like learning about the cycles of the land that I live on, and like not assuming that I can take action to change those cycles, without having like potentially dramatic and drastic like downfall, like downwind, like I don't know what's going to happen, like, and it seems, well, let me put it this way. When I try to change someone else's behavior by manipulation, and in that manipulation force, in a sense, I've learned that that's violence.
Yes.
Right. So if I do that, like if Mom, I want you, like, I'm going to try and manipulate you to do something different, like, than what's natural to you, like that can be violent really easily. If I'm not paying really close attention and having like a dialogue with you, right? Because like, who decides if something's violent?
But I think the receiver does, because it's what feels to them what is violent or nonviolent.
Right. Because like we look at it like, so if I'm doing something that causes you harm, I might be ignorant to it.
Right.
But you won't be. You'll know.
Right.
Right. And so am I paying attention to the language that you speak, or like so that I know when I'm causing harm?
Right. And you know, I don't know, there's many places we can take this, and I don't know which one you might, if you want to continue on this vein and do some.
What does it bring up for you? Like what comes up?
I had some curiosity about you and I talking about this whole thing with the taxes. Simply because I know you have I feel like I'm feeling reticent to talk about it, because this is a public forum, and I don't know who's going to listen, and I want to protect you. I want to protect me to some degree. So
I think what you just said says, let's not talk about that on here.
Yeah, I think so. We can do other things. But so here's something I'm struggling with that I'd like your reflection on.
Sure.
So in my beginning to like investigate integrity in the depths that the Remember Institute's class, Heal Thyself, is asking of its students, which I think is a profound class and a profound practice, and I want to recommend it to anybody who's listening. So we started a little bit with this learning what is integrity. And there's a particular series of definitions of integrity that I just began to read this morning, so I'm not at all clear on it. But one of the themes was, if you're having a feeling about someone, a thought or a feeling about someone, if I understood correctly, it was express it. But I believe that sometimes I'm in wrong thinking. And that wrong thinking is creating a feeling. And I don't want to bring that wrong thinking to someone who might have done something that provoked me to think about them in a certain way, when it could be my wounding that I need to go in and rework. So so that feels tricky. That feels like my internal work, my personal integrity is, before you, like, notice you're thinking that thought, but go inside. For me, this is what I think. Go inside, Donna, find the part that is feeling wounded around that. Like, you have a thought, this person should do something, or this person does something, and I make up a story about it. And the story is my story from my past history, from my wounding, and may not at all be what's true for the other person. So, for instance, the other night when you said, I won't be staying for dinner, I'll just be doing I started making up stories that you were hurt or angry with me, and that, or your dad, and that you didn't want to talk about it yet. And so you weren't coming. And I put out a little, is it because of the music? And you said no, and there was no explanation. So I was left having to sit in my one not knowing. And then my work was inside of me was, I'm allowing my son to have the space he needs to do what he needs to do. And when it's time for me to find out about what happened that evening, because I missed you and I missed Violet and I missed our routine, and I mean, and then what I do when you arrive is I read you without asking, like, are you open? Are you friendly? Are you closed? Are you stiff? Are you loose? Are you, like, I read you. And then in the reading, I just go like, allow, accept, be. And then I look for an opportunity, like, can we talk about what that was? Because I don't understand. And I'm working with my own integrity that, well, this is a new word that I'm using in this way, so I have to be a little careful. I'm working with the parts of me that make up a story that take me all the way back to loss. Like, how will I lose my son? And that brings up a lot of feelings. So, and some of it is also, there was a lot of loss growing up. My dad getting sick, moving all, there was a lot of loss growing up. And nobody ever really sat with it very much. So I think even just talking about it right now, I realized cycling through some of that old loss. And I think that's the other piece about this Heal Thyself class is it with doing the exercises of fear and desire, it really helps you know yourself deeper. So I've felt way more wide open this week, having started the class, and I could go on, but so that's a piece for me, like coming back to my original question of integrity, like feeling like it's my business I have to clean up before I even come out and ask you, what was that the other night that you weren't staying for dinner? What was going on with you guys? What were you planning? Like, you have this whole life, and it's just when I don't know what it is, I make up, I've done something wrong, you're upset, and you're withdrawing. And I think on some deeper level, and will you come back? And it happened with me with my mom when I got into therapy when I was 27, and with a therapist I was working with, she was all about my mom's controlling me and like my individuating, my separating myself from my mom. And I literally went from having pretty close engagement with my mom to like barely talking to her and telling her, it's just too hard, the stuff that's coming up. And it had started with my asking mom if we could talk about the past history and work some of the wounding. And she said, no, I can't do it. And with that no, I was like, oh my God, I can't talk to you because I'm all about the wounding. I'm all about investigating. I'm all about going into history. And for 3 years, I wasn't really engaged with her. And then she had a heart attack. And I made up the story that I had caused that heart attack by withdrawing from her. Yeah. So. Yeah. So there's some past history definitely coming up to be lovingly held and looked at.
And sending you big hugs, Mama.
Thanks.
So I know that you had a question, and I may or may not actually like answer your question. I don't know that I have an answer for you, but I want to bring us back to the episode that we did with Rev Bridge, because integrity, as I work with it, is something that I learned from her, as you're learning from her. And when she shared about integrity on the podcast, Bridge actually, I felt like gave like this beautiful, simple definition. And it was basically just like integrity is wholeness. And anytime that we are in any way feeling or thinking disconnected from being whole and complete, that we are out of integrity. And like that being kind of like what I'll call like a simple bedrock that has a lot of nuance and complexity that's like that emerges from it. One of the things that I'm being with these days, like I have a tendency to try to like simplify things, and not making that wrong, but also like remembering that like as simple as things are, they're also like equally, if not more so, complex. There's like so much nuance, like, wired for connection. The name of our podcast is like when I say that word, like that phrase, it means so much to me. It's like, I know my body is wired for connection, but then like in a very literal sense. And then if I go a little bit further out, like the space around me is also wired for connection. Like, and as far as I know, all space is wired for connection. I don't see any separation. I don't like, not, there's like differentness, but it's not separate. It's connected. All of it.
When you started talking about looking around me, I went technology. I went 5G, wired for connection. And then I was like, no, we're talking about space. We're talking about we are all space and we're all connected through space.
Yes. And all of that 5G, whatever, is part of it.
Yeah.
It's all part of it. Like you can't get out of the connection. Like I mean, maybe some force of nature can. I don't know. I don't see a way to do that. I don't feel a way to do that. And I don't know that I want to be honest. Like it feels like trying to do that feels like being out of integrity. Like I don't want to get out of the wholeness. I don't. Sometimes I don't like being connected to some of the things that I'm connected to, but like therein lies my work. And so one of the things that I heard from you was actually like just like a beautiful reflection of like what this moment in time brought up for you, right? So like I send you a text saying, hey, I'm not coming to dinner. I don't offer any explanation, which is a little bit outside the norm for me, right? And you don't ask, and you have like this whole story that comes out of it, true or false, like doesn't matter, like that's the story. And then like your willingness to follow that into yourself leads you into something, right? And one of the things that it brings up for me is I like the process of the pause. so that my response isn't reactive, which is something that I am working on and struggling with in different ways. Like, it's pointed out to me somewhat often that in my close relationships, that I react like almost immediately, with kind of like a wall or a pushback. And then oftentimes I like soften and like can open up like afterwards, but like that wall and pushback is like my kind of like my programmatic reaction. When something feels like close, I'm like, oh, I got to see what this is before I can let it in. So you could think of it as being, for me, like a place where I'm like remembering how to trust. Anyway, so with that, it's like I admire the, like, okay, I'm gonna take a step back, like this is my wounding to be with, and let me go be with it. And in that then like opens up space to like what just happened to happen, where it's like, hey, like here's what this wound is, like that all of this came up, right? All of this came up. And that's actually like a really potent connective tool. It's like, and this actually brings me to something that I learned through Heal Thyself and the Remember Institute, which is called the sensation frame. I won't go into the formula for here, but the sensation frame is part of that. And it's like, hey, this happened, and here's what it brought up. Right. And it's not like, and so that feels like a path towards integrity to me. This happened, this is what it brought up. And that like part of that is taking the time to pause long enough that you're actually telling the truth.
Well, and telling the truth without an obligation to you that you should do something with it.
Or even the assumption that what you're saying is true for me.
Oh, for sure. For sure. What I was saying, like that is definitely in question.
But that feels like, it's like, that feels like the thing to me, right? Because and like what you said is also true. It's like, but what comes up for me is like, I'm in a relational dynamic, right? Like you could have in a different relational dynamic, like come at me with like, what, you don't love us? Like you're not going to come to dinner? Like, fine, see you later, bye. Right? Like, and that happens all the time.
Yes.
Right? It happens all the time. Not necessarily here, but like it happens all the time. It's like we react based on, like I do this, like I react based on the story that I'm projecting towards the other person. Right? Like, oh, you don't want to hang out with me? You don't love me? Like, okay, fuck you, I'm out. Right? And as opposed to, wow, like, man, you said you weren't coming to dinner and I don't feel loved right now.
Or you said you're not coming to dinner and I'm sad and I want to know what's keeping you from it. And the deeper is, did I do something wrong? I mean, I think that's really the core. Like I have to go in and just that wiring that is, I'm gonna cry again, is so deep in me with the whole Catholic Church upbringing. With, I mean, just factor this in. I'm a baby, I'm born, and I have original sin on my soul, and I need to be baptized so that sin is cleansed. Imagine that.
I have, yeah.
Imagine that. And I'm like, that's crazy to think that this precious being that is a child of creation, which I call it God, universal wisdom, whatever. God's fine for me, source, creator. And you're saying that this creation is evil, which is going all the way back to all humans are evil and we have to convert them, which to me is this huge control dynamic that is like, who are you to say that I'm evil? Like, are you God? You're a human being making up these rules. I mean, so yeah, that's just like creepy, dark, heavy, controlling stuff. And I am sorry to any, well, I don't know that I'm sorry. I imagine that threatens a lot of numbers of our listeners, which might drop our rating down. But yeah, I believe that's wrong thinking. I believe that's disturbed thinking.
And it's out of integrity.
It is, to me, it is out of integrity.
Yeah, and just if we're using Bridges' way of looking at integrity, which I feel very strongly, like I use that
Right.
as often as I can, which is every day in some way, shape, or form, which is like that return to integrity is something that I lean on heavily because I fuck up all the time.
Right.
Like
right.
I make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so I want to bring in here, I was just listening to a podcast. It's an episode of a podcast called the Man Enough podcast. And it's an interview with a guy named Richie and a guy named Mannie. And I don't have either of their last names down.
Mm-hmm.
But these are two individuals that were incarcerated in California state prison system for, I believe it was like 7 years and like 13 years. I don't have the years down, but like for long periods of their lives. And in the system, co-created an organization. It's called Success Stories, and they're basically like doing the work of dismantling the patriarchy. And they started workshops and groups in the prison system to support the dismantling of the patriarchy.
Wow.
And they're both now out, and like they're doing this work.
Wow.
And like part of it is integrity. Like they talk about integrity. Part of it is, hey, I did this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you that I did this thing as a product of patriarchy,
mm-hmm.
but it doesn't excuse me from doing this thing. I have to own that. Mm-hmm. And this is coming up for me because there was this line, and I won't even try to quote them. They said it better than I'll ever be able to say it, just from their own personal experience, but I can say it in my own words, is this acknowledging that the system that we live within is designed to control us.
Mm-hmm.
And that it has always been designed to control us. And like, these two men are both Black men, right? So like the African people were enslaved as part of this system.
Mm-hmm.
So we've all inherited a system that is predicated on that enslavement.
Right.
And like the enslavement, like it's all there, right? And it's like the Catholicism, right? It's like, hey, we're gonna use original sin to let you know that you are not whole. And the only way you get whole is if you come to us, and we're gonna pray for you. And once we pray for you, now you can maybe be whole.
Well, and oh, by the way, in addition, you can only get to God through us.
Right.
You cannot get directly to God. So I was doing this polarity integration workshop with this gentleman, Christoph Melchizedek, and his wife, Elia. And they were talking about this travel they did. And I'm not sure, as I'm talking about it, how much I can disclose of it, actually. But one of the things that they were talking about is that these churches are actually part of the control system of the cabal.
Sure.
And that when people are in these churches, they are literally praying up to these antimatter entities that are using us as batteries to keep their antimatter charged.
Yeah.
And just see the prayers in the churches going up the steeples and them plugging into our bodies, kind of like the Matrix. I mean, I don't know, that whole sense of getting plugged in. So the last 2 days I've been plugging, like unplugging, just image unplugging. But yeah, that was. disturbing and felt awakening, like awarenessing, becoming more aware.
And I like to just like, I want to ground what you just said, because it feels really important, is like, there are tangible, real life people who are present time benefiting from the control of other people.
Yes.
And I'm just going to give a shout out. I will share the link to the Man Enough podcast that I was listening to, because in California, our carceral system, the state penitentiary system, is that. There are people who are directly benefiting monetarily and politically from imprisoning other people and literally using them for slave labor.
Oh my God.
Where they're fighting California wildfires, coming back full circle, for less than $1 an hour.
Oh my God.
Right. So if we just compound interest over time, like that's nothing.
Right.
That is by definition slave labor. They're being used for that. They go back in and they're held at gunpoint behind barred doors. And some of them in there for crimes that, like, I mean, hey, like I've used cannabis before. I can remember being 15 years old, having cannabis on me, being stopped by the police. This is an example of like what someone might call white privilege, right? Being stopped by the police. I was also drunk, and they found my cannabis. You know what they did? They didn't take me to jail. They could have. They poured it out and squashed it with their foot. I guarantee you there are people that are serving multi-year prison sentences for less than that.
Right.
I guarantee it. And someone gets paid because they're in jail. Right. So like when we talk about like the cabal, right, like that being a word that gets tossed around a lot, I find it really helpful to just kind of like, let's ground it. Like this is so relevant and real, like in very tangible terms.
Hard stuff. So I was having a experience in the class with being in the slave fields with the slaves, and then just feeling their pain. And I went for a walk and I tuned into Bridges' morning meditation. And I swear to God, that woman is brilliant. The songs that she had playing were exactly the songs with the words that I need to hear to come back into wholeness from the pain of those memories. So a shout out. Remember, Institute subscriptions, morning meditations, sign up. They're really powerful. Really powerful. It sounds like they're mostly Monday through Friday mornings at 7 a.m. Yeah, it was just, and I went from devastated and sobbing to walking San Pedro Valley Park forested path, listening to the songs, singing the songs, and having my heart land back in my body and my spirit feel renewed. And I call that some profound alchemy.
Yeah, one of the things that I want to just call in here is like, so some of the threads that we've touched on in this podcast can feel really heavy.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the things that comes up for me is like, when that heavy feeling comes in, it's like just going to say this, like, good, like, feel that, like, for myself.
Yeah.
And I invite anybody else into that. And in that also, like, remembering that there is energy of hope present. There's energy of healing present, and that sometimes it's like the heaviness for me has often felt unbearable, and it is every time that I have leaned into that, like, I've gotten to come back to something that like brings me closer to myself,
and your connection to the whole.
Yeah, which is one and the same to me, right? So it's like,
right.
Because so my experience is like this heaviness that I'm feeling maybe for the first time, right? Because like I definitely had those first experiences in the Heal Thyself program. There were like things that like wow, I haven't felt this before. And like in that, I'm like, okay, if I believe that I'm connected to everything and everyone, like just keeping it to humans, if I believe that I am connected to all other humans directly, which I do, then this new thing that I am feeling, somebody else has been feeling.
Yes.
Right. And maybe part of my role in being like a proponent of connection is to connect to the other people. Right. To share this weight that, like, just knowing that it's there, right? Because there's things that my body does not know and never will know. Right. Like, I'm never going to know what it felt like to be a slave in America. Right. The way that some of these ancestors of these people have. Right. I'm never going to know what that feels like. But I can connect to my imagination about what that might have been like. And that alone feels incredibly heavy and devastating. And maybe that gives me the capacity to be a little bit more compassionate. Right. And then that little bit of compassion, who knows where that goes, right? Like it's like the one thing that I know, like, okay, I want to bring this, like, again, kind of like just completing a circle. Part of what we talked to at the beginning was this thing of like, okay, so like, who says what's harmful? Like, who decides what's harmful? And like you stated really clearly, and I agree with you, it's like it's the person being harmed. Right. And I also feel like, and man, this podcast, like, you got to listen to this podcast that I've referenced a couple times, because they actually talk about, so, and this is new information for me, and it's relevant here. For someone who has been incarcerated for a crime, like say someone like robs a store, right? And then goes into the system and like realizes like, okay, I gotta come into integrity with this. This is way out of integrity with me. That individual who went into the prison system legally cannot go and apologize to the person that they robbed. And if they make contact with that person, they could be, and likely will be, reincarcerated. Wow. Potentially for life.
Oh my God.
Right. So, hey, this person has been harmed, but there cannot be reparation legally.
They can't even send an email, send a letter.
So I mean, I'm not the legal person, I don't know, but my understanding based on what I was hearing is a no contact. Like, you cannot make contact.
Well, wow. So my mind goes to, somebody thinks that reparation doesn't actually happen. So that person who got incarcerated can't be trusted. If they get near the person, they're going to do it again. Like, it's like this whole world of, if you make a mistake, you're always a mistake. Because that's the other thing with people coming out of jail is like, I don't want to hire you. You're someone who went to jail, like, so that label becomes a lifetime prison sentence.
It's like, so as like a mediator, like conflict resolution, like you and I both know, like the only way we resolve a conflict is to acknowledge that it's happened. Yes. And to let the wounded person like share like what they need to feel whole and safe.
Right.
Like, how do we repair?
Right.
And it, like, they talk about that in that podcast, to just like very beautifully concrete, like, hey, like
Right.
this is what's happening.
Because like me with you, if the person who was robbed or hurt in some way never gets to experience you in your reparative state wanting to heal me, I'm always going to be afraid of you. I'm going to always think you're out there and angry with me and going to do it again or do something to hurt me or somebody. So I always live in the fear of the lack of connection having a detrimental repercussion. Whoa, that's just like fear inducing up the wazoo. Dang. So neither party gets to come to resolution and peace.
Yep.
That's crazy.
And we'll just toss the sinister bit in, right? So people get paid money for people to go back to jail.
Like bounty hunters?
No, like people get paid. So when jails are filled, someone's pockets are getting filled.
Right.
So the more loopholes we can toss in there for people to go back to jail.
Oh my God.
In a capitalist industrialist system, someone benefits from that.
Wow.
Right. And so like, you know, you and I might think of like, oh, well, we want to make sure we're taking, like, someone thinks that like we're being taken care of, but like, I don't know if that's the way that legislation always works. Seems like it doesn't. Seems like more often than not, it's more about the bottom line than somebody's emotional well-being. Right. In fact, I don't know if emotions really matter to that bottom line and the way that our system is currently run. They might matter to some of the people, but do they matter to the system that governs the people?
Right. Is the system listening to the people?
We know it's not. It's not even a question.
So prayer, change this system. Get aware, get conscious, connect.
So there's a saying that I've seen floating around, that The Matrix, the movie, is a documentary.
Yes.
And I just leave that there. Okay, so we are at a time where I feel like it's time to wrap here. Is there anything else that you need to share here to feel complete?
Well, just how much I love you.
I love you too.
Yeah.
I really do.
Very precious to me.
I very much enjoyed this time with you too.